All right, welcome back to the Theologizing Subject. We have Deji Yesufu, and you're going to have to tell me how bad I just butchered your name.
Yeah, you
He's a
got
pastor.
it. You got it. It's excellent.
I got it. Okay. He's a pastor. You've had training in electrical engineering?
Yes, my first degree was electrical engineer.
Awesome. He's also a YouTube personality. He commentates on, theology and politics and, gender roles for men and women in the home from a biblical perspective. Really enjoyed your stuff so far, and I look forward to just letting people hear your story and hear what you believe and just the work that you're doing. You also wrote a book.
Yes.
The book is called Humanity, Challenging Narratives in Politics, Religion, Economy, and Society. I'll just let you introduce yourself, and please talk as much about the book as you want, because it sounds very interesting. That's right down my alley, and I know other people would be interested in that as well. Okay. So take it away, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Caleb, for having me on your podcast and your broadcasts. I'm very grateful. So I'm going to be depending a lot on the questions you ask me. So whatever direction you want me to go, I'm going to do. So my name is Deji Yesufu. I'm a Nigerian. I consider myself a missionary, even though at the moment I serve the Lord in the missionary work, but at the same time I do my work full time with the government. I've not enjoyed support, a lot of financial support, so I have to support myself, because I'm convinced of the work, so I have to support myself. And my experience in the past, I've been doing this since 2013, more earnestly since 2013. And my testimony is the same testimony that the disciples had when Jesus asked them towards the end of his life, towards the end of his life, Jesus asked, he said, have you lacked anything? And they said, Lord, we lacked nothing. That's my testimony. The Lord has been very kind. I wish I have more, but I cannot complain. The Lord has been very good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Would you want to tell us a little bit about your book, maybe to start off? Would that be okay?
Yeah. My book is a culmination. When the internet thing came down to Nigeria, some of us found Facebook very interesting. So what I did was that I will just write articles and put them online, and people like them, they share. And I noticed that there were certain articles that went viral. People enjoyed those. And there were some that that were popular, some were controversial, and all of that. So what I did was that some years back, just about 2 or 3 years ago, a publisher approached me and said that all these articles you're putting out there, many of them are very interesting, and don't just leave them in the public space like that. That he would like to, I give him the permission to gather them up in a book. And I did the gathering, but he went on to do every other thing, and of course did the publishing. Okay, so if I'm really going to talk about my book, I want to talk about how the whole inspiration for the material for the book came. So that will come from my background, and that is what I might want to respond to right now. So can I go ahead with that?
Absolutely.
All right. So, yeah. Okay. So, well, I keep looking back now on my life, and I am so confident of the biblical admonition or the biblical position that says that the Lord had actually owned me from my mother's womb. I might think that I came to know the Lord in my older years, like the Baptist confession would say, in the riper years. But now I realize that the Lord had been with me from my mother's womb. In fact, he is the one that did the forming, the putting together, and all of that. And so the Lord has so designed everything. I was born to a Roman Catholic mother, and my father is still a Muslim. My father is still a Muslim till this moment, even though I tend to think that he's more of the liberal Muslim. And when I look back now, I'm thankful to God that he took his position. His position on religion was a lot liberal, because if he was a lot more fanatical, like some other Muslims are, I probably would never have known the Lord. So I'm thankful to God that the Lord gave him that mentality to religion. He's not as fanatical as others. Okay, but my Roman Catholic mother, when she got married to my dad, I think there was some kind of deal between them. She wanted my dad to become a Roman Catholic, and of course my dad most likely have found a beautiful woman and said, "Look, I'll become anything you want. Just let's get married." And of course, after they got married, the man has what he wants. So he didn't need to, so he didn't convert to Roman Catholicism. But my mother must have. I never had this conversation from them, but I know that is very likely what happened. My mother would very likely have said, "Okay, look, if you are not going to be a Muslim, my children are going to be raised Catholic." And my father is like, "Look, I'm not hard on religion. Raise your children whatever you like." So my mom took us to the Roman Catholic Church from childhood, and I'm so thankful to my mother. I lost my mother to cancer in 2006, but my first revelation of God the Father came from that woman. I remember, I was 6 or 7, and I remember the place where I was in the house when my mom says that anything you do, Deji, anything you do, God is seeing you. So she was the one that taught me the omniscience of God and the omnipresence of God. God is seeing you, so be careful. And I remember that those words followed me even to the university, so that when a lot of my mates were going into vices and smoking and taking on young girls and all of those, I always felt the piercing eyes of God and the words of my mother saying, "The Lord is seeing you." So I'm thankful to my mom, even though she was Roman Catholic. She also taught us the Roman prayer, all of those things, the rosary, everything, how to pray. I spent time with my grandmother, who was the daughter of one of the leading Roman Catholic propagators in Nigeria. Okay, so I spent time with her, and she also taught me how to pray the rosary and all of those things. But of course, I grew up my own person, a rebellious sinner myself, and I remember that as I was growing up, about the age of I think that should have been 15 years old, there was this man who came to our neighborhood and was teaching us the Bible study for children. Okay, and I was about the older one of the children. So he would teach us about the Bible. But because we were older, sometimes he would gather us to the side and teach us more, But he was Pentecostal. He taught us how to speak in tongues and all of those things, I'm thankful to God for those experiences because it kept me away from certain excesses. While some of my friends may have gone into smoking and chasing after young ladies, we were intent on religion, wanted to know God and serve the living God. Okay. And after that, I deviated from religion completely, wanted to enjoy life. And I look back now and I know God was in that also, stopped following the Lord. But still, the words of my mother, "God is seeing you," kept following me anywhere I go. God is seeing you. God is seeing what you're doing. It followed me everywhere. Okay. Until when in my university, my 3rd year in the university, somebody ministered the gospel to me. And I actually was trying to run away from that person like Jonah, but I was in a cage and I had to hear what he had to say, and at that point, I just felt the Lord was saying, "You have to come back now. There's no going anywhere. You have to come back." And since 1998, I've turned my eyes on the Lord. I've not looked back. I think the more reason why I have not looked back is that God had always put me in a place where I needed Him. 1998, 1999, my father left Nigeria. My mom had been living in the US since 1988. So my father went to join her. So we're all by ourselves, and we became, many times we needed help, and there was no parents. So I learned how to call on the name of the Lord. And since that time, the Lord became Father to me and has kept me up to this time. So all of those experiences with religion, everything are the things that I wrote in my book. I have 101 of those articles, and when things happen and I feel very strongly about them, I write them in the article, and like I said, I found that people found those articles very inspiring, and if they found one article inspiring, I do not know what will happen if they have 101 of them, Recently, I was in a prison yard to minister to inmates recently in Nigeria, and I gave them 10 copies of this book free, and I encouraged them. I said, read the book, because it's talking about life from a Nigerian context, and these are people who are at the lowest ebb of life. And I said, if you read the book, you'll find at least one or two articles that will minister and inspire you to come out of where you are, So that's the idea behind the book.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for that. So you mentioned your mom being Roman Catholic and your dad being Muslim, but nominally Muslim.
Yes.
So what is the spiritual landscape as far as like maybe it's different from when you were growing up to now? Is it? What is the predominant religion? Like what do you run into the most often, I guess, in your area? And maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So Nigeria, originally, most of Nigeria was animist. Like any other place, most of the countries or the societies, because it was the British that brought all of us together and made us a nation. We never had that nation sense of coming together. Prior to the coming of the British, Nigerians had always lived in isolation. And I look now back at the history even of Europe, and I found out even way back in the 18th and 19th century, Europe were never like in nations. It was subsequently that communities came together and formed countries. So Nigeria was really not a nation like that. We're just disparate. And all of those communities, everybody was worshiping whatever they like. Some worship the trees, some worship cows, all of those. Okay, but there was some kind of Islamic revolution in the latter part of the 18th century, the latter part of the 18th century. A man called Uthman Danfodio became radicalized, not radicalized. He was taught the Islamic religion, okay, from some parts of the, I think maybe from Senegal, some areas. I'm not very clear with that history, but Danfodio was living in the northern parts of Nigeria, the place we call the northern parts of Nigeria now, Sokoto, and he became radicalized. He became a teacher, and like Muhammad, he felt the need to convert his neighbors. Okay, so he will minister to them, and then while ministering to them, he will convert them. But there were cases where people were not ready to receive his message. In those places, he will overrun such communities with military might and convert them by force. So that's what he did in the latter parts of the 18th century and the early parts of the 19th century. So that Nigeria originally, the northern parts became quite radicalized by Islam. So Islam was taking over most of the north, and they began to see the need to begin to come down Nigeria. If you can find a map of Nigeria, even for maybe subsequently when you're editing this, just put a map of Nigeria, you will see on this broadcast, you will see that Nigeria there's a northern part, there's a southern part. So the Islamists were coming down towards the south and trying to convert people. Okay. And then two things happened in the providence of God. The people in the south rose up against the northern incursion and the religion. Okay, for example, I'm from the southwest of Nigeria. So my own forefathers rose up against Islamic incursion, and they went to war and had to continually fight off the coming of the Islamists. Okay, in the process, some people were converted. Okay, and Islam began to find roots in some parts of the southwest, but many others were not. Okay, while this was happening, our brothers in Europe, I do not know how they got the message, but our brothers in Europe learned that most of Africa was being taken over by the Mohammedan religion. Okay, and they made the decision to come to Africa to stop the incursion of Islam on all parts of Africa. So what they did was that they came in through with the sea. Okay, so if you look at the map of Nigeria, you find out that the southern parts of Nigeria is closer to the sea, the north is not. So they came in through the sea and they began to reach out to communities in the southern parts of Nigeria and begin to drive up mission work to the north. So while the Islamists were coming with their guns and their swords, the missionaries were going with their Bibles towards the north, you know. And in the providence of God, what now happens is that till today, northern parts of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim and the southern part is predominantly Christian. Okay. However, many Christian organizations make it as their aim to continually reach the north with the gospel. There's an organization called CAPRO, okay, which they are worth supporting because they reach Muslim communities in the north. They don't have missions in the south because they consider that most of the south is Christian already, okay, but they reach out to Muslim distance. So that is the spiritual climate in Nigeria. Not predominantly Muslim, south predominantly Christian. And I just happen to be in the southern part. So most of the challenges that people have with persecution and all of that, we don't have it in the southern part here.
Yeah, man, that was a very thorough answer.
Yes.
That's really what I appreciate about what you're doing. I mean, you're not just getting a pastor perspective, but you're getting so much more with that. You're getting historical and, you know, theological, perspective,
Yes.
and you're not afraid to speak to politics and things like that. And I think that's awesome. So to kind of return to your upbringing a little bit, I'd really like to understand how you went from that to Reformed Baptist.
Yes. That's
because that seems like a big leap, right?
Yes, it is. It is. I also consider it the providence of God. Excuse me. Recently, I saw a scripture that might have even helped me appreciate it, and that is Acts 7:48. And God was just saying, I think the writer was quoting God and said that I will not dwell in temples that I have not made or made with hands. God is saying he would not dwell in. If he's going to dwell in a temple, he has to make it, and then it occurred to me that the reason why the Spirit of God dwells in us as human beings is because he made our bodies. Okay. If the Lord is going to be involved with anything at all, he must be the one who will make it happen. Okay. So that is why I do not take providences or providential encounters lightly. I mean, when I saw your email and you said, hey, I've been watching some of what you did, I knew you were God sent, because I know that people will get to know what I'm doing with time, but the Lord must do it. And that is why I don't go out of my way looking for Americans to interview me, looking for British. No, I want the Lord to do it, because if the Lord does it, then the Lord will dwell there. If the Lord builds the house, then the Lord will dwell in it. But if he didn't build it, if I put the house together, the Lord would not dwell in it. So I personally believe that my coming to become a Reformed Baptist is the doing of the Lord. And as far as I'm concerned, like scripture says, it is marvelous in his sight. And I would like to let you know how it happened. Okay, so the young man in 1991, 1992 introduced me to Pentecostalism from Ghana, and I backslided completely. And then in the university, it was another Pentecostals. And, that was 1998. I look back now and I realized that those were the dying days of true religion as far as Pentecostalism in Nigeria is concerned. Because today, many of the adherents don't bother about evangelism, but he was, told me about Christ. I was converted thoroughly, and I began to he said, go to this church. I followed him to church. In fact, he took me to church and more or less just dumped me there. He didn't disciple me. He didn't do anything. He just took me there and just dumped me. And while I was there, again, the Lord took over. And that's why I'm so thankful for his providence. The Lord took over. I was in my 300 level and I was doing very badly in the university because I was following the wrong set of friends, and they were more concerned with girls and parties than their education. And I was reading electrical engineering, which requires some attention, So my result was not good at all. So when I got into this to this church, these two young men, and I will always let me mention their names, Taye and Kende Bawanda. There is also this third guy, what's his name now? Israel Badaki. I mentioned him in my book. The three of them, they became interested in me. They were students also, but they became interested and they began to disciple me in the way they knew. So Israel Badaki introduced me to a man called Tunde Bakare. I mentioned him in my book. He's a pastor in Nigeria, Pentecostal pastor. Taye and Kende Bawanda began to teach me how to pray. But what they did, what God used them for me was that they taught me how to read. They taught me how to pass my exams. Because in those days, I thought I was brilliant. I didn't need past questions. I didn't need anything. I'll just read my books and I'll just go. They were the ones that called me and said, you don't do it like that. They said, take the past questions and study them. That most lecturers don't have time to look for new questions. They just take out of the pool of the old questions they've had. And it was like a new discovery for me. And I did it. And you would not believe it. My first year, I was converted. By my first term in the university or third level, I was converted. By my second term, the difference in my result was like the difference between heaven to earth. It was so clear, so that I moved swiftly from a very bad result to a very good result. In fact, I finished the university, I finished my department with probably the best improved result in the university. All because of those brothers' counsel, and thank God for godly counsel. They also taught me how to pray and all, but everything was in the Pentecostal realm. Okay, in the Pentecostal realm. Now, as all of that was happening, I was intelligent enough to know that the person who was pastoring the church at that time was not well schooled. Okay, he had, number one, he was not a university graduate. He just finished secondary school and went to Bible school straight. So he had some insecurities, but he wasn't well schooled. So I come to church and he's praying, he's shouting, and I wasn't inspired at all. So what happened was that I needed books. I needed to read books and just to learn the doctrine, And I found out that there were two types of literatures, two types of Christian literature. I learned this with time. I found out that there were some Christian literatures that they just talk about testimonies. They put lots of scriptures in their books, and they talk about the man, they give testimonies, and then then they'll say something, breakthrough, they will, I didn't enjoy those at all. I didn't, but I read them, but I didn't enjoy them. But there were some other literatures that the people will spend time to explain scriptures. They will take a text, maybe a verse, and then they will explain it, and then they'll go to the histories. They'll talk about, sometimes they go give testimonies of their life, but I enjoyed those ones thoroughly. And it was about that, and that same year, towards the end of 1998, that the Lord Jesus Christ, I will forever worship him and thank him, sent me a book by a man called Robert Tillman Kendall called Worshiping God. He's referred to as R.T. Kendall, but I prefer to call him Fool because he left such an impact in my life through his book, Worshiping God. When I got Worshiping God, in the book, he was talking about basically how to worship God, worshiping God through the things we do, through prayer, through preaching, through listening to sermons, through fasting, through giving, different ways. Then he got to this mighty chapter, and he said that the highest type of worship is the one where we do nothing, the joy of doing nothing. And I was saying, what is this man talking about? He said the highest worship is when we do nothing, when we just see God doing things, and in fact, to even say thank you is difficult because you feel that if you say thank you, you are trying to, take some part of the glory. So you just enjoy God, and God who sees our heart knows it, And then he now said that one of the things that leads you to worship God in that manner is when you appreciate the doctrine of justification by faith. I had never seen it anywhere. But before that time, he had mentioned John Calvin, he had mentioned Martin Luther, he had mentioned things like predestination, he had mentioned Reformed Theology, but he did not say justification. And I was wondering, what's this man talking about? And I noticed that, okay, so he made some references to Romans, So after reading that book, I just took my Bible and I started reading Romans over and over again. Just spend time in Romans 5, Romans 3, try to see what the whole thing was all about. And say, this is the gospel. This is the gospel, And till now, I still think sometimes that my conversion was not necessarily when that man led me to Christ through the Pentecostal experience. I think my conversion was when I understood justification by faith, because it radicalized my mind, changed my mind completely, and of course, I began to look for anything material that said anything Reformed theology, that said anything justification. But it was so interesting that in my final year in the university, I was reading electrical engineering, 2000, the year 2000. I had finished all my work, it's practical, so I had finished all my work. And what I did was I was supposed to write the literature review.
Woohoo!
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, so
We're good.
After the disconnection, I think I needed to leave and come back in again just to rebuild the system.
Oh, okay.
We have a serious problem with Nigeria with power supply. Power just suddenly goes. I have a backup that I use. I just recently installed. It cost me a lot of money, but I'm thankful to the Lord for the provision. Can you tell where I stopped in my train of thoughts? I was talking about...
Yeah, you were talking about how the lights just came on.
Yes, I was talking about how I became, I encountered Reformed theology and ultimately became a Reformed Baptist. So in the year 2000, I believe, yes, 2000, I went to the library to write the literature review of my project. Okay, so I was writing my project, but I'm an electrical engineer. My project is practical. So I didn't need any literature cover for it. The only part I needed literature review was the history of what I was doing. I did a project on alarm system, so I just wanted to write something. So I went to the library, read up some books, and I think in about an hour or two, I was done with that because most of the project had been written. So I sat back and I said, what do I use my time for? And then it just occurred to me that this thing I've been reading with R.T. Kendall, Reformed Theology, Protestantism and all that. Why don't I read it up on Encyclopedia Britannica? And we had this large Encyclopedia Britannica everywhere. So I went there, I picked one of them, I checked Christianity. I didn't enjoy it too much. So I said, let me check Protestantism. And that was, wow, oh there. I sat down, I was consumed. I read everything. The history, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli, the core of their message, the things that happened, they took their time, and I was just reading. When I'm done, I'll go home, come back again, read and read. So I went there for something else, and don't forget, the Lord building his temple, the Lord taught me something else entirely. So that's how I became well-rounded and I also began to enjoy church history, became quite well-rounded with that. But I was still, so what I would say is I was born again. I had come to understand what it means to lay faith on the Lord Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in one hand. Okay, but I was still carrying out all the excesses of the Pentecostal movement. I was still speaking in tongues and doing faith and all of those things, But little by little, the Lord started cutting those things off. I remember when I stopped faithing things, how the Lord stopped it. And he did it he stopped it. My mom had been living in the U.S. since 1988. And I was supposed to go to meet her in the U.S. in 1999. So I went to the American embassy, and thanks to you Americans, you can be so very tight with your invitation. So when I got there, the lady asked me questions and I answered. But before going, I have been faithing it. I'm going to get my visa. I'm going to get my visa. I'm going to get it, And the lady asked me a few questions, and the next thing she just stamped on my passport. Visa denied, And I went from a height, and I came down. I began to wonder, there must be something wrong with this faith nonsense, and with time. And about that time, I was reading a particular book, and God used that book to just explain to me what happened. That he has not asked me to be faith in anything, just trust him and he'll work everything out, So that happened. And then, I Yeah, so finished university, and thanks to the Nigerian economic situation, I mean, the no job, you have to trust God, went through lots of difficulties, health challenges, everything, but the Lord in his mercy delivered me, But thanks to the internet began to help us to meet people and appreciate things were happening. So what happened was that I got connected in 2013. I got connected with a local church, a Reformed church in Lagos, Crown Reformed Assembly, pastored by Pastor Taye Arimoro. So it was in that church they first of all pointed out the error of speaking in tongues to me, and I dropped that, and then began to learn to pray properly, and then as time was going on, I was working with them. They more or less sent me back to Ibadan. Lagos to Ibadan is about 100 kilometers apart. So they sent me back to Ibadan to do missions, By that time, I was already working with the Nigerian government, so I was able to sponsor my own missions, and do things my way. So as of that time, I was writing on Facebook, and most of those articles is what I gathered up in my book, not most, just a few of them, because I've written so many articles, but the publisher took the best of them, 101 of them, and put them in that book. So in 2016, a young man came to me. I met him on the internet, just like I'm meeting you too. And he said, look, there's a seminary coming up in Nigeria. Would you like to be trained in seminary? I said, why not? Something that I would like to do. So when we got to the seminary, the minister at that seminary trained me in the 1689 Reformed Baptist Confessions, and even though he didn't do the training, the teaching directly, but I think I became a Reformed Baptist by looking at the history. As the teacher was teaching us the history of the Protestant development, I began to appreciate the Reformed Baptist position, because don't forget that originally we Protestants are actually our fathers, Calvin, Luther, and Zwingli, are all Paedo-Baptists. But as I read the history, I became convinced on the Reformed Baptist position, and of course got to lay my hands on materials by C.H. Spurgeon, John Owen. We read a lot of, there's this theologians in the 19th century, B.B. Warfield. We read a lot of B.B. Warfield, and all of that. But what I enjoyed the most as seminary was church history. And if ever I'm going to teach in a seminary, I'm going to ask for them to give to me to teach church history. Because the way I learned my church history was I didn't just learn the European and American church history. I also was able to lay my hands on materials that talk Nigerian church history. Christianity came to Nigeria in 1834, and our Christianity is not, our witness is not at 200 years. So we have a lot of two-team problems, so I enjoyed that, and I'm hoping someday that my magnus opus, material that I want to bestow to the coming generation is I want to show them the development of theologies in Nigeria, how the white men brought the gospel, Protestant religion, almost Calvinism, to our town, and how over the years all of that has become the nonsense that our churches teach today. I want to show who are the people who brought the deviations, who are the people who taught the errors, and that's what I want to do. I want to do it for my PhD, and I don't care talking about it anywhere. If anybody does it before me, that's good and fine, but it's something I want to do at the highest level, and hopefully publish that for the coming generation.
Yeah. So one thing I feel like that reminds me of is I think a lot of the chaos that you guys have received, right, is from us. It's from the U.S.
Yeah.
And some of that's charismatic stuff, and then others is, the influence of feminism. I'm convinced feminism is, destroying us. I think it's one of the worst things that has ideologies that has come through. I think it's fundamentally just Marxist.
Yes.
And something I've noticed here, and a lot of people are noticing, is our seminaries, even Reformed seminaries, even seminaries that have a good history of teaching, solid biblical doctrine. there seems to be a shift. Everything seems to be going left, even seminaries that previously you would trust and you would, feel comfortable sending your friends to, or your, church to.
Yes.
Now seem to be compromising on so many issues. Feminism is one of those. And oftentimes it's, just like a complementarianism or things like this. But even, Reformed churches, Reformed seminaries that you would think would be teaching a very strong, like, Christian patriarchal order in the house and order in the home.
Yes.
And I feel like for me and for a lot of other young Christians out there, it's caused a lot of confusion. It's caused a lot of chaos. We don't know how to run our homes. We don't know how do we relate to our wives? How do we relate to our kids? Like, we have a lot of confusion on these issues. And so, I think a lot of people are looking for an answer to that. And I think you're talking about looking further back to Calvin and Zwingli and all of these guys. And they had answers for these things. And it seems that we ignore those things a lot.
Yes.
So I wondered if you wanted to, I really enjoyed your videos on those things, especially, the order of the home. And I don't point it out just because it's controversial. I point it out because we need clarity on this stuff.
Oh, yes, we do.
So I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit to that, at least maybe start with the order in the home and how do you view that, and how do you, where do you get that in scripture? And it's going to sound crazy to a lot of people in the U.S., but it's standard evangelical theology.
That's the way it should be. Yeah. So we got our influences towards the madness, the charismatic chaos that came to us through two means. The first one was money, and the second one was media. Okay. So what I think happened in the West was that there were some ministries that got access to a lot of free money. I think they were able to cajole their members to believe that God demands they give money through tithes, through prophetic offering and all of that. While some of these things are not wrong in themselves, it is the way they went about getting this money and using them that is wrong. Okay, so they had lots of excess money in their hand. And so the next thing, of course, is that when you do that, you begin to feel, want to take the gospel to Africa like our fathers did. And we began to have people like T.L. Osborne and others come to Africa and picking, Pentecostal ministers start to teach them, sponsor them, give them money, And these people didn't only have money, they also had access to media. They had formed television, radio, magazines, all of that. They were just pouring their rubbish into Africa. And Nigeria being the largest African country, in population-wise, in Africa, Nigeria was our dumping ground, so it was their dumping ground. So they brought in a lot of this rubbish, and before you knew it, all of our pastors began to propagate it as gospel. There's a man who was at the leading front of it. His name was called Benson Idahosa. He went on to become the Archbishop of Pentecostalism in Africa, but that's it. He was the false prophet of our time, and he helped to propagate that. Now, as they were doing that, of course, there were lots of money, and they were teaching these pastors that, look, get your people to also give, and all of us were pouring in our money. I remember then that my dear mother, who sent little money to me from the US to take care of myself and my siblings, half of that money will put it into the church. We're giving just so that we can be liberated from poverty, Now, besides this whole false doctrine, or one of the outcomes of this false doctrine is the place where, the fact that they are unable to teach what a biblical home order should be. Okay? They give you the impression that money is the most important thing in a home. That's what they give you. So what happens is that they encourage for the man to go and get the job and get as much money as he can lay his hand on. Then they encourage the woman to go and get a job and get as much money as, And then what happens is that the man and the woman get their money, and then they come to their house. And then the woman thinks because she has as much money as the man, or probably more money than the man, she must not or cannot submit to the man's authority, and then in these churches, these false churches, the women tend to be more liberal. Women can easily be moved emotionally. So what they do is they take all the money, they take a lot of their monies to church. If a woman earns, for example, we use Naira here, she earns 100,000, she can, without a bat of an eye, give 50,000 out to the church, but the man, before the man gives 5,000, he's thinking of school fees, he's thinking of rent, he's thinking of so many things, so the church pastors begin to like the women folks more, so when there is marital crisis and the matter is brought to the church, the churches always tend to support the women because the women are the ones helping them financially. So this thing has caused lots of problem in our side here. It's causing a lot of problem in the homes. Homes are breaking up because men will insist. Some will insist on their patriarchy. They'll say, "Look, this is how my father raised my mom, and our home turned out well. Our home well. So I'm going to do." They'll put their foot on that. You must do it my way. And the woman, because she has her own money, leaves the house, go and gets her own house, and things like that. She built her own place, that's on one hand. On the other hand, there are some men who say, okay, because they don't want their homes to break, they'll just kowtow to whatever the woman says. So the woman becomes the head of the home, the man becomes more or less like. So it has affected everything. It comes from the doctrine. It comes from the doctrine of the church. The doctrine of the church. Now, if a church is biblical in its doctrine, the first thing you want to know is that, number one, the people who come together in holy matrimony must be men and women who know the Lord. They must be born again. They must be able to submit to the commandments of the Bible. They must be able to also submit to the working of conscience, because the Spirit of Jesus would always speak, and he will speak according to the Bible. Okay, so in one hand, the Bible will say the man is the head of the home. Okay, and then the Bible will command the woman. Ephesians 5, the woman was to submit to the man. First, the man is the head of the home. Secondly, the woman is to submit to the man. And not just submit, is to submit in everything. Not just in some things and then leave some things out. No. Whatever your husband says, you do. Okay? We've had situations in our community here in my missions where a man, before the man got married to the woman, where we've had to, we'll try to talk to the man and say, okay, mister, this is how things should be done. And you say, no problem. I will do whatever you ask us to do. We'll tell the woman this is how things, and the woman will say, no problem. And then they get married, and then the man turns around and says he's not going to follow the church again. He's not going to do, this is how things are going to be done. And I tell the woman, I say, look, we no longer have authority over you. It is your husband. Whatever he tells you to do, you must do it. Okay? If he has said, don't come to church anymore, if he has said, this is the direction, that is the direction you will take, because he is the one that has authority over you. The only way you can come out of the tyranny is to beg the living God to turn his heart. Okay? So, many times the men will just turn around. Before they got married, they say, we will come to church, we'll walk with you, we'll do. But the minute they get married and they take that decision and say, look, we have no authority. This man has made the decision. Woman, obey your husband, follow him wherever. But these false churches they will tell you, look, they will tell the woman, they will say, obey your husband in everything. But with regards to church, never obey him. You have no right to obey him. Okay? And they impugn on homes, and homes are breaking up. The things that are happening in Nigeria is unbelievable. These churches are destroying homes. I wish I could mention names, but these days people take people and to court, and they I will just save myself legal this thing. But even in my own home has gone through a lot of stress because false teachers come into my home and they try to advise my wife, against me, and it takes time. Many times these false teachers will come, they will say things, and they could say one thing in 1 hour. It can take me 5 years to change my wife's mind, So the last time one of them called me and said he wanted to see me, and I replied him, I said, Mr. Man, I'm no longer a member of your church. You have no authority to ask me to come and see you for anything. The last time I was there, It took me years to remove all the toxicity from my wife. So this time I'm not coming, and he said, he never knew that a day will come, he will call me to come and say, I said, I don't need to come and say, you're not my father. Even my father can call me and say I should come and this thing. I'm man of my own house, so that's it. The man hates the home. And, Caleb, let me tell you something that I discovered about the West. I'll tell you. I don't know whether you have realized it. You can confirm it. Years ago, in Caucasian communities in America, they learned this secret, that it is men who go to war. Women stay at home and take care of their children. In fact, I learned about a tradition that you have in the US. They call it dwelling. Okay, that the family's name and honor is at jeopardy, and the man of this house and the man from the other house, they come together, they pull out the gun, and at the first shot, whoever hits the other. Most of the time, you are not killed, but in some cases it turns out fatal. I wrote about dwelling when I first read it. The man goes out. So I was saying, why would the women allow their husbands to go and do such a thing? And somebody answered, says, it's the family's honor, the family's name that is at risk. So that's it. Men go to war, women stay at home. All right. But it's not just necessarily going to war like that, going to fight with guns. Sometimes even the business arena is warfare. And it's men that must do this thing. Okay. So what happens is that the man, look at the Trump family. The man goes to the world. He makes business. He makes a lot of money. He comes back with the money and he takes care of his family. The women take care of the children. And then the women raise the girls to be homekeepers, homemakers, and then raise the boys to be men of war. Okay? So that by the time the man is getting old and is passing away, he's passing the family business and tradition to the boys. Okay? Who again guard it? And of course, you have the system of a will. The man wills his resources to the woman, to the children, all the girls as much as the boys. But the boys handle family business and it prospers. That is the reason why there are some businesses now in the US that could go for 100 years, 200 years, 300. In Nigeria, the moment the owner of the business dies, that is all. The man is gone. Why? Because he has not trained his children to hold and handle finances. So we have, it's a terrible, the things are happening. I don't know what's happening in your side, but here, this false doctrine, the man, and women, we are designed to take care. We find our greatest joy in taking care of our wives and children. A man will go without food, but it was recent when I had my children, I realized, I didn't know it was happening to me unconsciously. I will be hungry. But the moment my children are fed, I don't even feel the hunger anymore. I don't mind just taking a biscuit as long as my children are fed. I watched a one of these nativity movies recently, and he was talking about we're in the we're in the Christmas period, so I can tell it. It showed this video of Joseph taking Mary to Bethlehem, for that counting where eventually she had. And then they were very poor. So on the way, Joseph they had just very little food, so Joseph will give the woman the food, and then she will ask, have you eaten? He say yes, that he's eaten. So sometimes to convince her, he will put the food in his mouth. And when she takes her sight away, he drops the food somewhere, so he was going hungry, but she knew that she needs to feed. And he kept all the food for her. That's what men do. We deny ourselves so as to take care of our families. But women are not designed that way. Women are designed to keep things. It's just like that body physiology. They receive, we give. Okay, that's how we're designed. So, in a home where a man earns money, has a lot of money, or has his own money, the woman has his own money, the man is giving of all he has to make his home work. The woman is receiving from him and keeping hers. And then eventually we have had a tragic situation where there are some women who will be building estates. And then the men are actually renting houses from their wives' estates and they don't know. it is happening in Nigeria. I'm telling you, the woman would have built houses. The man didn't know that the woman has that kind of money. He's the one paying the woman. He pays rent to the woman through her lawyers. It's happening in Nigeria. So, in a biblical church, men must be taught to lead their homes and provide for their families. Our women must be taught to submit to their husbands. That's all. Love your husbands, submit to them, submit to whatever they say. Yes, the decision a man could take could be wrong, but men are very rational. The moment they realize that what they are doing is wrong, they change. It's women that are emotional, so that's it. I don't know how it's affecting you people over there, but the false gospel of prosperity gospel has destroyed homes. It's not, we can do a whole episode on it. It's something else.
Yeah, it's a very bleak picture. But I do have hope because I think a lot of people my age and younger are waking up to that fact, and they're seeing that chaos.
My book, Humanity, I wrote lots of
articles in their own
against.
Homes.
I think that's coming from me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you're back.
Yes. In my book, Humanity, I wrote lots of articles against the prosperity gospel. Lots of them. Warning against the error. It's a horrible thing. And I hope that people can learn from that and take a cue.
Yeah.
And raise biblical homes. It's very important. Very, very important.
Yeah. Well, Pastor, we'll go ahead and land the plane. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I really appreciate that you were willing to come talk. Specifically, this last point we're on is huge for our generation to hear, and we need guidance. We need understanding in these things, and we want to love our families well, and that has a definition. It's not just how do I feel about it, but it's what does the Bible say, and it's a lot of encouragement for me because I'm trying to figure this out right now. So I really appreciate it. I would encourage everyone to go and buy this book. I will be buying it as soon as my paycheck allows. It's called Humanity, Challenging Narratives in Politics, Religion, Economy, and Society. I'm really excited to jump into that. I'm going to go ahead and press pause here, but if you'd stay on for a few minutes, that would be great.
All right.
Thank you, sir.